Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can really help the show reach more loss and infertility families by taking a moment to leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. Check us out on Patreon for exclusive bonus content. Just go to patreon.com/Finding Hope After Loss. You can also check out more information about the episode in the show notes at journeyforjasmine.com. In this episode, licensed perinatal mental health therapists Mahaley Patel and Emily Souter share about their upcoming book, Your NICU Story, reflecting on your family's experience. Drawing from both personal tragedy and professional expertise, they open up about the emotional toll of a NICU stay, the healing power of writing, and how their new book offers guided reflection for NICU families. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Emily and Mahaley. Hello, guys. How are y'all doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, likewise.
Emily, do you mind telling just a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm a perinatal mental health therapist here in Maryland, and I have two kiddos, and I split my time between homeschooling them and also have a small therapy practice and enjoy working with perinatal mental health as well as neurodivergence. And I've written a few books, so I really enjoy writing as well.
And Mahaley, do you mind sharing a little about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I am also a perinatal mental health therapist in Nashville, Tennessee. I have 4 kids, 2 cats. I feel like they always deserve an honorable mention. In addition to seeing clients one-on-one, I have a stillbirth and infant loss group that I run. I serve on the Bereaved Parent Advisory Council at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. And then obviously I have this book with Emily, which is why we're here. So
What led you to be, involved in grief and perinatal loss?
I always knew I wanted to work in the perinatal mental health space, but I would say that it's shifted over the years. I think prior to losing my daughter, my focus was more on birth trauma. I do a type of trauma therapy called EMDR, so naturally kind of just got a lot of those clients, really enjoyed working with them. That's actually how I found Emily's original work, her book, Birth Story Brave Reimagined. But when I first bought it, it was just Birth Story Brave. And then I really enjoyed working with postpartum individuals and parenthood. So I think though it shifted slightly, I'm doing more work in the infant loss space, working with bereaved parents, NICU families, but still definitely practicing, with individuals that are navigating or have navigated birth trauma. And my oldest is almost 9, so general parenting is still always very much of interest to me. And I have a lot of clients that have been with me for a while, and so they're sort of naturally kind of segueing into that. So that still remains a big topic of interest.
So a question for either of you, but do you think that maternal mental health is a unique type of mental health?
I do think so. I mean, I think that while you don't necessarily have to be certified to practice that way, I think that, doing plenty of education specific to the nuances of that season of life is really important to the clients that we're working with. And, that goes for even outside of therapists, really just understanding the things that mothers and parents in general go through during this part of life. And obviously that looks different for every family, but it's really helpful to have just that extra knowledge. I mean, I know it was beneficial to me when I started specializing in this area to just really dive in and start to know the things to really connect with the people we're working with and help them do the most healing.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I think it's been beneficial for me to specialize in this area and really fine tune my focus. And I feel like it's becoming more common, or maybe it's just here in Nashville it is, but I feel like when I started, and it was a very select group of people that were kind of working in this space, and now I feel like it's exploded, which is a great thing. But I definitely feel like it's been beneficial for me to specialize in this area.
So what is it that led you to decide to write this book together?
I'll start. So as I kind of previously mentioned, I had used a book that was recommended to me by a friend and a colleague that was written by Emily. At the time, it was Birth Story Brave. Now it's Birth Story Brave Reimagined. And I used it in working with clients who had navigated or were navigating birth trauma. And I think that it was the first time that I really realized that telling your story, using narrative therapy and writing, the power that that could have in someone's journey and someone's healing journey. And also just being able to reflect on different parts of your story that maybe they couldn't get to in talk therapy and like traditional talk therapy. So, I would say that I used it regularly in my practice. And that was that. I never really thought about it beyond that, right? As other than just like a great tool and a really powerful tool. And then in 2023, my daughter passed away after a NICU stay. And I wrestled a lot with whether or not I was going to go back to work. And if I did, what that was going to look like. And eventually I sort of came to the decision of like, I really want to fine tune my focus in this space even more and really focus on NICU families, work with NICU families, having obviously been a NICU parent and a NICU family, and working with bereaved parents. And I have just personally found writing to be really helpful in my grief journey. I would say it's been the thing that maybe has been the most helpful. And I sort of kept, coming back to in my head her book and thinking like, wow, I really wish that there was one really dedicated for NICU families, because I think the NICU experience is so specific in what it is, regardless of the outcome, right? We walked away with the worst outcome, and not every family does. But I think that regardless of the outcome, I think families walk away with, most families at least, as just such a significant amount of trauma. The NICU experience really leaves a mark. And I, was like, I really want to do something and create a useful tool to help families in this way. But I wanted it to look very similar to, in its format, to the books that she had written. And so, like any normal person does, I just emailed her and told her who I was and told her my idea, and here we are. And I'll let Emily take it from there.
Yeah, no, she just reached out and it was totally random, even though we have the same specialty. Of course, we're states apart and had never happened to meet at a conference or anything like that. And so it was out of nowhere, but also really well received. I always really appreciate hearing from people who find any of my tools helpful. It honestly does feel good to know that they're out there like serving people in the way that I intended. And I just, I had included a handful of questions about the NICU experience, but the idea about expanding it into like its own thing seemed like it could really help support so many families. And the idea of doing it with someone else was really intriguing because I've never partnered with anybody else on a book before. And so, yeah, we hopped on a call and kind of just started throwing ideas around and really quickly felt aligned with the vision that we had for the book, and just kind of seamlessly started putting together an outline, and it just really started to come together really quickly to where, here we are now, and pretty soon we'll be starting to open up pre-sales for our book, which is exciting.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
How long did it take you, like, when did you start the process to now? How long did that take?
I'm trying to remember. Did you email me in like October-ish?
I think it was September, or October of
Okay.
last year. So it will have been almost exactly a year from kind of start to finish. Yeah.
Yep.
So, what do you hope that people get out of this book?
I know for me, one of the things, and I think Mahaley would agree, is that that their story, their experience gets to hold all the parts that it has without only being just the really hard and challenging and grief laden parts, but also the other parts that might be supportive, or even maybe there's some warmth or tenderness or something surprising like strength. That all of those things are given permission to exist at exactly the same time, so that the wholeness of the story is really allowed to enter in, and that people are able to find themselves in that and take ownership of the story, but by being the author and by being the one who's helping to write it in all of its fullness. That's, I think, my biggest hope, and that it helps them feel seen in their experience.
Yeah, I would say I would echo all of that. And I would say just Ultimately, I really hope that it contributes to someone's healing journey in a positive way, and I think too we have a section in the book kind of specifically designated for families that leave the NICU without their baby, right? So their baby did not make it, or maybe they came home and they passed away later on. And for, I think, families who've lost children, I think finding ways to spend time with their babies that they've lost is important. I think it's been really important for me. And I also hope that for those families, this book can be a way of doing that for them, in the same way that I think writing this has felt like time I spent with my daughter. I hope that it is the same for families, who've lost children.
Definitely. When I lost my daughter, she was stillborn at 32 weeks. I started writing as well, just, writing my feelings, just writing, things like that. And I, like you, I found that super helpful. And it feels like your way of parenting them even, and,
Mm-hmm.
keeping their memory alive and sharing their story. So I think that's definitely, something everybody should try.
Yeah.
So I know that you mentioned earlier, the trauma that comes with a NICU stay. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know that it can be long and complex, but what are some of the issues that NICU parents may have to deal with?
So many things. Yeah, I think that, look, there are the obvious, the medical bills, right, that add up really, really, really quickly. And then I think sometimes there's less obvious things. For some families, NICU stays are very short. They're very intense. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made in a really short amount of time. There's a lot of information thrown your way in a really short amount of time. It can be every moment can feel really critical when you're in the NICU. And so for a lot of families, just having to sort through that kind of information is really challenging, making really hard decisions that you never thought, you would have to make in regards to your child's care can be really, really challenging. When you have a birthing parent in the NICU, right, there's certain physical challenges that come with that. So like in my case and several other, NICU families' cases, maybe there was an emergency C-section and they're having to navigate like a really challenging recovery while also being in the NICU, which isn't always friendly to recovering physically, right? In the way that you need to be. It's not necessarily a really restful place or anything like that. Yeah, I think that those are some of the things, like immediate things that come to mind. Of course, there's families that don't live near the NICU that their babies are in, and that brings a whole other host of challenges too. That was the case with a lot of families that we came to know at Vanderbilt Children's, and that was never lost on me, right? That we were thankfully not too far of a drive away, but many families were hours away from their home.
We see that like, the physical environment of the NICU is really overstimulating for a lot of family members who are there, that the physical experience of being there is really lasting because we connect those memories, like the physical memories, the sense, the sights, the sounds, all of those things. We connect those with the memories. And so those are one of the things that have such a lasting impact, like that it's imprinted, it feels, on us. And I think, sorry, Mahaley, if you already said this and I zoned out, but just like also the other responsibilities at home, like if you have other kids and things like that, and or, a job that you need to figure out about taking leave from, if that's even an option, and needing to decide how to split your time, it's really, really a lot to hold for someone.
Yeah, I can't imagine, trying to navigate, wanting to be there every moment with your child, but then having all your other responsibilities you have to deal with and knowing that, the bills are piling up but it's just a lot.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
lot.
And I feel like with the NICU that a lot of stories are more focused on only those with positive outcomes, and a lot of times we don't hear about the ones that don't have the ideal outcome. Is that something that you guys have noticed?
I feel like that's something that I've kind of seen more frequently, but Mahaley, what do you think? Do you feel like in being in those spaces that you tend to see the same?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think some of that may just be because that is the more common outcome,
Mm.
right? Your baby survives and is able to go home. And that wasn't the case for us. Yes, I definitely think that's true. I feel like I know a lot of NICU families. I don't feel like I know as many that have our outcome.
Right.
Before you two started, doing all this or having any NICU experience, did you really know anybody else who had had a baby in the NICU or a family that had gone through this?
It's interesting for me. I actually, let's see, I think none of my friends' kiddos had NICU time. When I was a teenager, I actually spent just a bit of time volunteering in a NICU. We have a couple, living close to Baltimore, we have some big hospitals here. And so when I was like 15, I was volunteering in the hospital on the pediatric floor, and one of the places that I was able to volunteer was the NICU. And so I had some exposure that way, but had not had any friends at that point. Well, I mean, I've had some since then, but like early on, I really didn't. I've had a couple of friends, one of whom was our beta readers, who had a NICU experience with their daughter who came earlier than expected. But it was really limited for me up until more recently.
It was limited in terms of my personal world, not having a lot of friends that have navigated the NICU, or, I had friends that maybe had a baby in the NICU for a day or so, right? And so, not that that obviously can't bring its own challenges, but I think that it maybe just left a different mark, right, on them and their whole kind of birth and postpartum experience. But client wise, I have had several clients that have navigated the NICU in a pretty extensive way, like more than, like a day's stay or something like that. So, yeah, professionally, I feel like I had some exposure to that and some things that it brings. For all of my clients at that time, before I, became a NICU parent for the first time, their children had all survived. And so, again, that's you take home different things, right? And so a lot of their work was kind of in a different area, but still very much NICU related.
Yeah, and I think like it certainly worked with clients and have learned a lot through my clients. And that goes across the board, NICU related or not. I learn a
Mhm.
lot from my clients. And I really am grateful for that. But yeah, from a personal perspective, actually, that's been one of the gifts of working with Mahaley is learning even more and learning even more about some of my friends who did have experiences, maybe before we met or something like that. That's been one of those additional, positive things of working together.
Do you feel like people in general that have gone through this type of experience openly talk about it, or do you feel like most people just kind of maybe share like the basics, but don't really go into, the trauma part of it, or like how do you think people are typically talking about this?
I feel like, and again, you know, I hate to separate it out so much, but I feel like in my world of people who've lost children, the NICU was very much a part of the story because the NICU was, where maybe they started to realize that their child wasn't going to come home, right? So NICU is like very much part of the experience. I feel like for both friends and clients I've had who have navigated the NICU but have had children survive the NICU and be able to come home, I feel like it's looked different in that their NICU stay comes up later on. Maybe they don't realize right away, right? Maybe they're focused on bringing their kid home and adjusting to their new normal, or if their child came home with medical equipment, right? Or certain needs, medical needs, they were adjusting to that. And it's not until later that they kind of realize, like, oh, I've got some real medical anxiety, right? I've got some real fears around this. Or being in a hospital again is really hard. And I didn't expect that. It's almost a little bit delayed, I feel like, that they sort of realize that the NICU, or I've even had clients where it didn't come up until they decided to later expand their family. And the fear of going back into the NICU again kind of came up. I've had that a lot too. And so I feel like it's looked really different for both clients and people that I know, and for myself, of course. But I feel like it's there, right? It's just maybe in a different way and maybe at a different time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like when you're first bringing the baby home or, just focusing on getting through this day that you push all that aside and you just focus on, tunnel vision on the like this is
Yeah,
my goal. And then later you come back and it's like, "Oh, wow, it's all it's all coming up now."
it's all there. It's all there. It stays there, right? Just might be dormant for a while.
Yes, that's exactly like, and that's part of why we're doing this, right? That's why we want to, when people are ready, it's not about forcing them to confront stories, but to see the value in spending time with a story because it does live there.
So I know you mentioned that there is a section in the book for people who have lost their babies in the NICU. So do you feel like this book is for any parent who has had a baby in the NICU, any length of stay, any type of stay, or like who do you feel like it's for?
That was definitely our goal. So our
Yeah.
aim in how I mean, we've put a lot of thought into how different types of readers might engage with the content that we were including in the book. And so our goal was really to make this book as inclusive as possible when it comes to different experiences. And that includes also non-birthing partners and non-birthing parents, like in case we've talked about cases of adoption and surrogacy and NICU, but truly like most parents would be able to engage with the questions and material that we were offering because we really wanted families to be able to experience story healing.
Yeah. I think our hope is that, anyone who has had a baby in the NICU, whether it's a grandchild or a niece or a nephew or a child of their own, right? Regardless of the duration of the stay, regardless of the outcome, can pick up the book and get something out of it.
Is it also useful for like siblings of babies who have been in the NICU, or is it mostly for like adults?
I definitely see our book as being, and when we're writing it, it's geared towards adults.
Hmm.
But with that said, I can see how there would be certain themes and questions that could be presented within a family and discussed and processed within a family about impact and experience and what that means to a person. But I wouldn't be like, here, child. Like I wouldn't just give it to a kid and be
Yeah.
like, you know.
Yeah. I definitely wouldn't give it to a child and just like close the door and leave
Right,
them.
exactly.
But yes, I think that there absolutely are. My oldest daughter was a little over 6 at the time that my daughter died. And she's 8.5 now. And she's done a lot of writing. She writes letters to her sister, right? And that's in the same world as what your NICU story is, right? Is getting your story out. We even have a prompt in there about writing a letter to your baby, right? So absolutely it can be used for kids, I think, with parent supervision.
Right, exactly. There's guidance that would be, I
Yeah.
think, to make it age appropriate and all of that.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about what people would find in the book? So, I know, like you've talked about that there's stories and things like that, but what is there anything else in there, or like what can people find in there?
Yeah, so the beginning part, obviously after the introduction where we're kind of warming people up to what to expect. So we do share a couple of stories. Mahaley's husband actually shares his story of how sort of from the partner perspective. And then we also have a contributor from like the queer family perspective to give a different voice to a different non-birthing partner experience. And there's a part in there where Mahaley even talks about like how she kind of sees signs from Sachi, and there's a poem from her. And then, yeah, the rest of the book is all questions, but in a very mindful way so that people are kind of eased through different portions of their story to be able to sit with different information at a time. And we give lots of reminders throughout that people are in full control over their pacing and the amount of time they take as they go through. Like they can put it down, they can come back to it later, everything's going to be there. But yeah, now I'm blanking on the number of sections. Is it five? I think
5.
it's five.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like there are several questions within each section, and that's really where, we're inviting people to focus on their own stories. We have the stories in the beginning, which is really helpful, I think, to help feel connected, to help families feel understood, and to even learn some more about experiences that could be similar but different from theirs. And then they really get to start focusing on their own.
I love that format too. It's not just, a list of questions and just go about it, however you want. It's like there's
Right.
an actual structure and a time to sit with the feelings because, you understand that it's not going to be an easy thing to just answer the questions.
Exactly, exactly. And our beta readers were really helpful too. I mean, I think we were very mindful of this up front, and then we got even additional feedback from our beta readers that was really helpful in terms of how they were experiencing moving through the questions while sitting with their own experiences.
Did you find that writing the book helped you heal at all from your NICU experience?
I think that it has been, a way for me to feel like I am spending time with my daughter, which is like the most healing for me in the journey, right? So like every day I intentionally have at least something in the day for her, right? In the way that I would for any of my living kids. And so this book has been that for me. I think, I remember when I thought about going back to work and I'm like, this is such a curse to have this be my job. Like, why couldn't I just have like be an accountant? I love numbers, right? Not that it would have been easy to go back to work in that setting, but I wouldn't be faced with working with clients from various walks of life, but all kind of under the same umbrella of perinatal mental health, right? At a time when, by the way, I'm in need of my own, therapist working through this. And so, but something I think shifted for me of I can go back to work. I can shift and sort of focus in this space. And I find it really healing to help other families that have walked through this, because I think one of the hardest parts about all of it doesn't even have to be child loss, right? It can be just the NICU stay. It can be postpartum in general. It can be parenthood in general, is feeling alone, feeling isolated. So for me to make a difference in whatever capacity it ends up being through this has absolutely been a very healing piece of it. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's little things in the book, like, with Emily's other books, right? There wasn't as much of a personal element as this book has. And I'm so grateful that she was open to that, right? I know that's not for everyone. I personally, though, love hearing other people's stories. I love hearing other people's experiences. And there's I feel like, just little mentions of her, even in our cover, right? The butterflies are very significant in our story. And, she was super open to like putting that specific kind of butterfly on the cover. And so it all feels like her to me, right? And so I think that just means everything, So yeah, it absolutely has been.
I'm laughing because I actually am an accountant, so I'm laughing
That's
about that.
amazing. The amount of times I'm like, I love numbers and I should have just done that. Like why?
Sometimes you're like, did I choose the hard path? I don't know why I did this to myself. But then at the same
Sure.
time, you find it rewarding and healing. And you're like, all right, I get why I do it. But
Exactly.
so if you were to give just any kind of advice to someone who was navigating a NICU stay or navigating, after a NICU stay, what would that advice be?
I would say, I think finding a therapist who specializes in perinatal mental health is extremely beneficial. And I always tell people, I tell clients this too, sometimes you got to go through one or two. Don't be discouraged if the first one you meet is not the one. That doesn't mean that therapy isn't a possibility for you, and it doesn't mean that it can't contribute to your healing. I also, and Emily and I, share about this a lot. Like, we hope that this is a tool that someone could pick up and bring to therapy and say, like, I want to work through this, right? But I want to do it with the help of my therapist, or vice versa, that a therapist finds it and brings it to a client who could really benefit from it. I think, and again, this idea of isolation and being in community is, I think, so important. And that doesn't have to mean a big community. But whether you have navigated a NICU stay and your child went home with medical needs, right? You navigated a NICU stay and your child went home without medical needs, or you navigated a NICU stay and you lost your child. Like, there are other people who have had similar walks that you have had. And I think being in community and the value of shared experiences is so important. So that can be like, a lot of hospitals have in person and online groups for families that have been in the NICU. There are lots of organizations. We even have several listed as resources at the end of our book that have groups for infant loss, for NICU families, for children with medical needs, all kinds of different things. A lot of them are free too, so this doesn't have to be like an expensive endeavor by any means. And I think, the last thing for me is, and I've kind of mentioned this, is like, for me, feeling like I have really intentional ways to spend time with Sachi and parent her have been incredibly important. And I think that that has really contributed to my healing in a pretty significant way. And it looks different every day. Sometimes it might just be like, I really find her in a lot of music, a lot of lyrics like really speak to me. I feel like I find her there a lot. So sometimes like that might just be a solo drive running to like pick up my kid from school, right? But I'm really intentional with that time of like listening to music that feels like it reminds me of her, feeling like a song that I can like find her in, right? So it doesn't always have to be these like grand gestures. Sometimes it is, and those feel really great too. But sometimes it's really small and it's still just as meaningful.
Yeah. We also talk a lot about, just like I said before, like allowing all the story parts to be present. So like if you find yourself after or during a NICU experience and having sort of these seemingly conflicting emotions or feelings of like grief and gratitude and things like that, that just to give them permission all to exist at the same time, and that's okay. Just really having lots of self-compassion for yourself, lots of gentleness, because moving through these things and recovering from them and finding healing is a process, and there's no timeline to that, even though sometimes people around us or other things try to tell us otherwise. There's no exact timeline to that. So finding ways to express yourself, whether that's in journaling or creating art or songs, like connecting with your kiddos and through music, things like that. And I know Mahaley has talked before about finding hope in other people's stories. And, when it feels good to do that, finding those stories in the communities that you find yourself a part of.
Is there anything else in general that either of you want to share about the book?
Well, I mean, it'll come out September 15th. We're very excited to have it be available. Pre-sale should be available soonish. Of course, this is now early July, and so I would say by mid-July it should be available through pretty much where most books are available for sale. And yeah, we're just really hoping that it serves families really deeply.
Yeah, I echo all of that.
Is it going to be available in digital too, or just hardback?
We decided to start with paperback. It'll be paperback. We decided to start with that. I have offered digital formats of my other books in the past, and there wasn't as much of a, I guess, desire to have that. I mean, people could easily have the digital and like write their own notes in their own journal or paper, but for whatever reason, it seems like people really preferred to have the copy. So if there seems to be a desire for that, I think we're both open to adding that in the future, but wanted to start with the paperback option.
So do you have other, like if people wanted to read more about you guys or, connect with you, do you have social media or a website or anything like that that they could go to?
We do. So our book website is yournicustorybook.com. And my Instagram is emily.souter.lcswc. It's my license, like all the letters. That's my license. And Mahaley's is her name, but it has an H in the middle and no dot. So it's Mahaley H. Patel is her Instagram. And
Well, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on today and sharing your story and about your book, and I can't wait to read it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. And we're really, again, we're just hoping that that connects deeply with families and helps them.
Thank you so much, Emily and Mahaley, for sharing about your new book. I know it will be so helpful for so many NICU families. Don't forget to pick up a copy of the book, which comes out September 15th. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.